You don't get pop-ups on Amazon that say $5 off this item. If they're offering a coupon, there's this little checkbox that you click, and when you click that checkbox, then that coupon gets applied. There's a whole science as to why that happens. If you think about the engagement of the user, it's not something that they're being forced to intake.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Eagan Heath from Asymmetric Marketing. We help our clients with WordPress, WooCommerce, on-site SEO, paid search, paid social, email automation, and much more. You can check us out at asymmetric.pro. Today, I'm speaking with some experts in AI, conversion optimization, and much more. We have Zabe and Rameet. They're here from Metrical. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Maybe you could tell people a bit about what Metrical is and a little bit about who you work with.
Yeah, great question. So Metrical is basically a platform that's used by e-commerce brands to help them increase on-site conversion. What we leverage is clickstream data. That's specifically what that translates to is like people that's coming to the website, what are they doing, where are they coming from? We collect that data and we feed that into machine learning models, and then allows our machine learning models to predict who's going to leave from the website, who's going to build a cart, who's going to bounce from a PDP. And based on those actions, our software allows retailers to be able to engage all of those cohorts differently, or all these different people separately in different ways. Our goal is to drive conversion, prevent bounce and abandonment from an e-commerce site. The kind of customers that use us are usually e-commerce brands that are about $50 million or more, and typically are focused on having enough data to be able to leverage that data for increased growth. But we work from smaller e-commerce brands like a Fossil or a Brooks Brothers, all the way up to multi-billion-dollar brands like a Penny's or a Dick's Sporting Goods.
Very exciting. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about maybe some of that data. And I don't know if we hear machine learning. Obviously, we're in the realm of AI, artificial intelligence, and then it also sounds a bit like kind of personalization in terms of, are people seeing different things when they use the website? I wonder if you can talk about some of the data you're looking at and maybe a little more about how that's being used.
Yeah, so personalization's obviously been a hot topic for a long time, and I feel like it's still a holy grail that no one's really nailed. We think that now we're at a point where there's enough interesting data where you can start providing really personalized marketing experiences. And we're not just talking about, hey, Eagan, come back to our store, and just because they reference your name that they know enough about you. But the kind of data that we collect is really anonymous non-PII data. So we have information about, through our tag that gets installed via like Google Tag Manager, is who's coming to the website from not a name point of view, but like their IP address. But we then know where are people coming from: Instagram, Facebook, Google AdWords, whatever it is. We know when they come to a site where they're going: homepage, product detail pages, are they landing on certain product listing pages? And then the most important thing we know is what's the outcome. Do people end up actually bouncing or staying on the site? Do they browse more? And based on these different paths, what we're able to do is figure out who should be engaged with and how. So if we know that somebody's coming in organically, they typed in the name of a brand and went directly to the homepage to then 3 PDPs, that seems like a person that may be engaged and might know what they're looking for. So they don't actually need to be engaged with. Or if we know that this is a person that's visited again for the third time in a week, it seems like it's somebody that is already on track with regards to what they want. And so we shouldn't be in their way. But if you've got that consistently 97% of your traffic bounces from, because it's always coming from a certain ad word from Google, then how do we actually figure out what that person is and who that person is, where they're landing and where they're coming from, and figure out how do we engage with them to actually drive them to either stay on the site longer, create a cart, and then to eventually purchase.
And the challenge certainly is, how do we go from data to insights? It sounds like this is tying those together a little more tightly. Of, you can be drowning in data in Google Analytics 4 or an analytics platform or in your ad platforms. It sounds like this is actually trying to make changes based on what you're seeing in the data. I wonder if you could give an example of, let's say I'm on one of these websites, maybe one of your clients or users, or I'm a user on one of their websites. What might change as a result of my behavior on, let's say, on a smartphone?
Yeah, so a lot of things could change. If it turns out that you're a first-time visitor, you might see like that standard discount promotion banner across the site that most e-commerce sites have today, 25% off your first visit, or you might see a pop-up that says, give me your email address and you're going to get 15 or 20% off your first order. Right now, I think retailers think of that as sort of a spray and pray approach, and everybody gets that same message. What you would end up seeing on sites that use Metrical is that different people would have different types of experiences. So if you were a returning visitor, you may not get that pop-up asking for your email because we know that you're a returning visitor. Or if you're a part of the loyalty program and we know that you're coming back to the website, then that banner offering you a 25% off discount might disappear, because if you're a loyal customer, you buy frequently, there's no reason for the brand to actually give away margin and discount to the customer, because we know that there's a very high probability that they're going to buy. And so not only are we trying to find a way of being able to personalize the promotional or the messaging on the site in a way that helps drive conversion for the people that really need it, we want to be very thoughtful about trying to get out of the way of people that don't need it, because there's no reason for retailers or anyone that's in this very tight budgetary world for e-commerce brands to start giving away a discount or a margin if it turns out that that shopper was going to buy anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if you could talk about, you and I were chatting beforehand, you said people have gotten used to 3% conversion rates. You talked about 87% bounce rate or 97% leave. What are the steps? What are the changes that e-commerce websites can make to get above that 3%? It sounds like some level of personalization, like you're describing, it can be a piece of it. But are there things you see that really move the needle that you think people should look at?
When you're looking at things like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, you get this very high level data that's telling you about what's happening in your funnel. In fact, I think it's most useful for saying, look, this is what your funnel looks like, and this is what's happening at each step in your funnel. But the reality is that you got thousands of people coming from different sources at different times of day, landing on maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of different PDPs. And trying to analyze each one of those individually is pretty much impossible. I think even if you had hundreds of people working for you, trying to do that analysis would be impossible. So in an ideal world, what would be happening is that you'd look at each individual, where do they come from, where do they go, what ended up happening, and you would try to find a way of being able to tailor a message specifically to them. But we aggregate all. In today's world, what everybody does is that, because that's so hard, we aggregate that into the big picture view of you've got incoming traffic and then what happens at step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 of those funnels. What we try to help customers do is that we use data, machine learning, and fundamentally break down that huge funnel into these micro funnels of each individual's, figure out what the leakage points are in real time, and say, okay, these are the people to engage with, and these are the people you don't engage with. And by doing that, what you end up doing is you start moving away from this 3% conversion regime to figuring out how to optimize the conversion rate at certain points in the funnel on certain PDPs or on certain search pages, rather than a whole hog 5%, 10, 15% discount to everybody that visits all PDPs or everybody that comes to the homepage. So it's really about moving away from this strategic kind of discounting that a lot of brands do, or strategic promotional messaging that brands do, to moving to very targeted tactical promotions, where that means targeting certain people on certain PDPs and not targeting certain people on those exact same PDPs because they don't need it. And by doing that and being much more personalized in the way that you think about the engagement, the message delivery, what that actual on-site engagement looks like. Everybody hates pop-ups, so don't do pop-ups. And how do you eliminate those kinds of obstacles to drive a much more personalized, ingrained, and simpler flow? We find that drives a huge amount of improvement in not only
at the end of the
conversion rate, but
day,
customer loyalty.
it comes down to improving the customer experience. If the shopper is coming to your site and they feel that it's a seamless flow in terms of coming, getting what they want in the process, maybe seeing some sort of message, whether it's a free shipping reminder or a discount or whatever it might be, that speaks to them and allows them to just move on to checkout, they're more likely to come back and purchase again. And so what Metrical is really doing is we're not only focused on increasing conversion, increasing incremental revenue, preserving and in some cases increasing margin, but overall we're improving the customer experience, which really I think is that sort of intangible thing that moves that conversion needle up and breaks out of the 3% world and you start seeing that 4 to 5 to 6% increase.
That's very cool. That's exciting. One thing I wonder on the machine learning front, it makes sense with the data going in. I wonder on the, I'll call it the hypotheses of what do we change, what should happen. Is that if then logic that humans kind of program into it? Or do you find the system is coming up with its own hypotheses of what to change and testing those changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we typically end up doing is when we're working with an e-commerce team, they know what their marketing schedule and promotion calendar looks like. We're basically getting from them a list of different types of marketing promotion things that they had already planned. And our system is then doing real-time multivariate testing of those messages and trying to figure out how do we figure out what the right message is for the right person at the right time. One of the things that we do that takes that one step further is that if a brand is doing like 25% discounting, like that's their standard discounting. We ask them to give us the option of being able to do 10, 15, 20, 25% discounting. And then our system does real-time multivariate testing of those for each individual that comes to the site by category, by source, by referral source, by PDP, and then figures out how do you actually start bringing that discount level lower and lower so you can still get that same level of conversion, but by giving away less money.
Very interesting. It sounds like some of the messaging and the creative comes from maybe the marketing team and maybe the parameters on any discounts or anything like that, that those kind of get set. And then those are being tested in an automated fashion by the system. Is that right?
In essence, our solution learns over time. And so it begins to figure out what messaging is most effective versus what isn't as effective and tends to then remove those from the queue, so to speak. And so initially, there's a little bit of training and learning that has to occur in terms of us feeding data into our models, the retailer brand we're working with providing us with their marketing calendar. But over time, that's what Metrical does really well, is that our solution begins to figure it out on its own. Now, the retailer brand will always have full control of all messaging. We never put anything out there that doesn't first get approved by them. But as they see that our solution begins to mimic their behavior in terms of the type of messaging that fits their brand criteria, that their shoppers resonate with, they begin to trust the solution more and more to start handling it for them.
Very good. I'm curious, do you think there's such a thing as best practices in CRO? Are you able to see changes in your systems for your clients that pretty much across the board always work, always help? I'm just curious.
We find that trying to make the entire experience as frictionless as possible tends to be one of the best things. So one of the things that we do with a lot of our clients is try to move away from this ingrained idea that in order to be able to engage with the customer, the best thing to do is either have a banner or a pop-up. And so we've really been moving towards this idea of engagements that are much more seamless, much more a part of the customer journey. I mean, if you take a best practice, let's take a look at Amazon. Yeah, everybody knows it. Everybody uses it. It's like a benchmark, obviously, in terms of the way that we think about e-commerce. You don't get a pop-ups on Amazon that say $5 off this item. Now, you must have seen this little checkbox, right? You basically, if they're offering a coupon, there's this little checkbox that you click, and when you click that checkbox, then that coupon gets applied. There's a whole science as to why that happens. If you think about the engagement of the user, it's not something that they're being forced to intake. It's something that they choose to participate in. And all the research and the data shows is that when you get the customer to participate in the buying process, even if it's something as little as clicking a checkbox, that can drive like an 11 to 14% increase in conversion. And so our process in terms of working with e-commerce brands is to think about where and when to engage with people and how, to Rameet's point, do you provide that customer experience in a seamless way so that it's not full of friction and allows the customer to be able to get what they want while also meeting the needs that the retailer is shooting for and trying to find ways of making that as smooth as possible.
Very well put. I'm thinking back to what Seth Godin talked about permission marketing, as opposed to interruption marketing as permission. And he was talking about email marketing way back in the day, even in the 90s. It seems to me that it applies with user experience and conversion optimization of, like you said, with pop-ups or anything that's invasive feeling, put it right on the page, let them opt in, let them click and interact, and then learn from those interactions.
That's a really great observation. Now that you mention it, I know about Seth Godin and his focus specifically on email marketing, but that's a great way to think about on it.
Yeah. And I have to confess too, we'll do, Klaviyo and other tools, email marketing for our clients. And my business partner, Mark, and I often debate of this is a pop-up here. This is a bad experience. Let's get rid of it. I think you guys would have the data to see this many people bounce or this many people leave after they see one. So you can be data driven about it. We found, at least for many smaller e-commerce businesses, it ultimately is worth it. If it's alienating many people, but it's getting other people on the list, you're able to drip market and continue to market to them. But there's got to be a point where you're losing so many people that it's hurting you more than it's helping you. So I can certainly imagine that.
Yeah, you can also understand that the landscape of how we track people online has changed a lot in the last few years. And so one of the things that's fundamental to the engagement with a customer is also knowing, is this a repeat visitor? If you've got somebody on iOS that's coming back, let's say for the sake of argument, every 10 days, you're losing visibility into whether it's actually that same person or is it somebody that is a repeat visitor. So a key part of our underlying technology is long-term visibility and tracking of individuals regardless of device or OS. And so that gives us the ability to figure out whether somebody should or shouldn't be engaged with a modal pop-up. So maybe it's a great idea for a first-time visitor, but if that person is hit ignore once, you may want to try a second time with 50% of that population as to whether they should or shouldn't get it. But if that person's hit ignore twice, then the third time you're annoying them. So our system is able to look at these longitudinal views of an individual and see what the repeat behavior looks like over time and figures out who should be engaged with and who should be ignored.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Dave
Oh, go ahead, Rameet.
Earlier, but I think it's important to continue to emphasize that all of this is built off of non-PII data, and we don't collect any personal data. It's all anonymous data. And that is something that is quite unique about our solution in terms of us being able to collect these data points and still with a very high level of accuracy, accurately predict when hesitation occurs in the shopping funnel and then determine if engagement is needed and what type of engagement should be shown. And so that is something that our customers really value, the fact that we are all about privacy and are not collecting any type of personal data.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know you mentioned the PII piece. Since you brought this up, Zabe, I have to ask, and I wanted to ask, and now I have my chance. In the whole discussion about Google Analytics 4, and then certainly with meta ads, and then what happened after iOS 14 and the tracking, how do you, and feel free to answer or not answer, but here I have my iPhone, right? I've got my Mac, I've got my MacBook, I've got my iPad. So I'm in the Mac universe, but I have a PC at home as well. Sometimes I'm in Chrome, sometimes I'm in Safari, sometimes I might be in Brave or Edge. Are you able to tell that's me across those different devices and those different browsers?
Not if you're not logged in. Yeah, and that's something that is this holy grail of tracking people. I actually hope that problem never gets solved from a personal level, but it's something that I think everyone would love to solve, but I don't think it's going to happen. The reality is that each device has got its own IP, even though it may be under sort of a master IP for a house or an apartment building or something like that. But each device is individual. So unless you're logged in to those, there's never going to be a way to really know.
Interesting. And anything server side, anything Google's working on, that problem's not going to go away. Is that right?
The thing that Google has the potential power to do, and arguably maybe even Apple has to do, and now we're starting to get like in tech nerd world, is that because you're using the same browser, there may be ways that because you're logged into the Chrome browser or you're logged into Safari, that then you could say, it's like, okay, now we actually know who this person is, that even though they're not logged into to the e-commerce site, but I know that because you're logged into Safari on these 3 different devices, that I know who you are. That starts getting into really tricky territory for Apple or for a Google, because if they're now starting to track you across multiple devices, they may have that information, but them making it available to a retailer or an e-commerce brand, that becomes really problematic because they really spend a lot of money talking about privacy and making sure that your data is safe. So if that data stops becoming private and safe, their reputation is obviously at risk.
Yeah, I appreciate that discussion. Thank you. I wonder if we could wrap up here, guys. Let's say there's people that you can talk a bit about who Metrical is for and who it's a good fit for. I want to also have anybody watching, anybody listening, if they don't have that kind of traffic or that kind of revenue yet, just some things they could do. Some things that I took from this conversation is it's very important, obviously, what device people are on, but also how did they get there? What was the source medium before they got there? Someone who's coming from search is going to behave differently. Somebody coming from paid social. So certainly think about that and slice and dice your data that way and see how it's performing. But if there's other takeaways that people who maybe aren't necessarily ready for a metrical yet, what do you think they should be doing to increase conversion rate?
Yeah, so our sweet spot, like I said at the earlier part of the call, is that 50 million and above. But if you're not at that point, I would say to embrace testing. And analytics and testing is look at your data. You don't need to actually solve your problem for all 500 products on your website. You really need to solve your problems for 10 products on your site. It's probably the vast majority of your revenue comes from a handful of products. Spend a lot of your energy looking at the referral sources for those products. Is it paid versus organic? What's happening when those people are getting to those 10 products? When they're there, are they bouncing? How much time do they spend there? If you don't have a solution like Metrical, then start testing what you can in terms of engaging them after 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and seeing whether there's something that specifically clicks with regards to certain types of visitors. People coming in from a Google AdWord may have a different engagement than somebody clicking on a Facebook or an Instagram ad. So starting to just test with a handful, manageable set of products is going to be something that a lot of companies can do. Maybe hard for just a mom and pop shop. You've got a couple of analysts or one analyst on your team, or you're a really dedicated e-com professional. Trying to figure out how to test and look at the data around a handful of products is going to pay huge amounts of dividends versus trying to solve the problem everywhere.
Yeah, that's well put.
I just want to add something. Like today, we're targeting the retail sector, the larger retailers and brands, but our solution actually really can help any industry where there's a call to action for a consumer on a digital property. So some of the other industries that we're looking at and dipped a toe in the water, travel, hospitality, financial services, insurance, where Metrical can help improve application pull-through rates, improve booking conversions and things like that. For Metrical, there's a bigger world out there, and we're looking forward to continuing to serve all our retail brand customers, but also excited about venturing out into other industries and being able to make the same impact for those companies.
Love it. Sounds good. If people want to check it out, the website is metric.al. Is that right, guys? Very cool TLD. Great looking site. So you can learn more about it there. Anywhere else that people can follow you guys and see what you're doing?
I think that's a great place. And then follow us on LinkedIn. If you follow the Metrical company page there's constant updates in terms of podcasts like this one that we are involved in, to press releases. We just had a couple of customers actually just go live with us and put out press releases this week. And so that's where a lot of insight can come into the kind of impact that we can have.
All right. Zabe and Rameet, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what's working in e-commerce.
Thanks a lot for having us, Eagan.
Thanks, Eagan.